news like month at all.
Oh,
This is like everybody's news month.
what quarter?
Too many bad things happen, but
But not all bad things.
not all bad.
Australian spaceship made it up to the space station.
I know that's about as good as the news gets, though. Unfortunately,
That's still news.
as far as things go, yes. I really want to make sure there's very minimal processes going on. So this has to last.
What 5 things I sent to you?
We've got a bunch of people that have gone through them, but we're kind of holding back to do a big analysis a little bit later. It's just nice to get some stuff so that we can at least look at it.
No, my question is, online.
Yeah,
form,
but
right?
we
I don't
haven't
know
got-
what I did actually.
Oh, okay. You need to know what you wrote.
Yeah.
Okay.
I gave it a document, but it looks like the document is blank. So maybe that's not safe.
All right. Well, we'll find it. We'll find things. Grab some sandwiches, everybody. Hello?
Howdy.
Are you here for the Android class?
Okay.
Have you been following with our online session, or is this your first time here? Okay, so FYI, this is part of a continuing class. How much experience do you have in Android?
Doing some with the with it.
Have you made like an example app yet?
Yeah.
Okay, so what
I did it
we're
with, back when they had like it's like an add-on to the
So-
LI.
So we're at the point now where we've covered like how to handle click actions and change things on the UI and things like that. Have you gotten that far?
Yeah, I've done that mostly on here because I've been trying to make the Android studio go, although we did it before as like an add-on to the Eclipse.
Oh, okay.
Thing that
Do you think you could possibly help them with getting
Possibly,
Android
yeah.
Studio?
And depending what all you need, I mean, as long as we have, I don't have it on a flash drive. or
Yeah, no, but we have Wi-Fi.
Yeah, so, it's pretty, yeah, I'll be happy to help you with it, it's pretty straightforward. So,
you have some procedure used to all the students in the class able to
See everything?
set up,
We did at the beginning of this course,
Okay.
and it's mainly going through just the online instructions. We did it in the first day of the class. This is actually the 5th session of 6 sessions for this class. So if you want to sit in and be able to kind of, if you have experience in Android, you might be able to catch up to where we are or understand what we're going through. I just want to prepare you that you're more than welcome to stay, but it's like, you know, we just need to make sure that like you can, it's not gonna like blow over your head, you're gonna be frustrated and
yeah, I mean, I'm not certain if the class has downloadable, like, up to this point, I don't think it does.
no, because we've been continuing work on like a couple of projects.
Right, and so, I don't think they have a, like, hey, here's the source code so far, I don't think they have that. But,
I have a pretty close approximation, but
Excuse me.
I've sent that on the Slack channel. But yeah, you're more than welcome to join, have a
yeah,
sandwich.
come in and have a sandwich, and if you wanted some help just with Android Studio, as long as I've got extra time from, helping other people with, like, the class content, I'd be happy to, like, work with you.
Hello.
Is this the Android class?
Yes, is this your first time here? So just to let you know, this is part of a continuing class series.
Okay.
This is the 5th out of 6 classes. How much Android experience do you have?
0. I've done
Okay.
iOS, so it's,
Have you been following online?
I just found this today. and it says
Oh,
sign
okay.
up.
So, the best I can tell you is we might be able to help you get set up and be able to,
Well, and on
Continue with
the
some of the
upside, all the actual content is available online too. So,
Okay.
I mean, you won't have us, but the content is still all there.
Okay.
So it's not like,
right, and plus we have all the sessions recorded,
right.
so,
So it's not like it's just you,
I can get caught up.
right, it's just this particular time, you'll probably be like.
I was lost really well.
Okay. cool, just wanted to prepare in
That's
case.
fine. I didn't know, but couldn't tell from the website whether it was
Yes.
just starting or was already started.
Water.
Up twice.
And then there's also water around the corner, because unfortunately I wasn't able to refrigerate that.
Yeah, the ice last time we.
Extremely.
For which thing?
A whole lot of light space back there.
What? What did I do over the weekend? Oh, helped people with things. Yes, I forgot about that. I do forget things from time to time. Usually when I help with something for some regard. All right, actually, I do want to make sure that I get this at least set up for.
Scout back in the alley and see if there's.
There might be ice in the galley.
The one on the left is not.
Quite. I ordered things of soda from them, and they did not deliver, and then they refunded me my money for soda, but I didn't have time to go get more, so.
Yeah, the first couple were very, very full. Sent them and the last was about 30. Now, they're also in general, like,
Where are you?
but that's going to be, yeah, that's going to be more, kind of, not a structured content. There'll be content, but it will be, oh, well, somebody wanted to present on this particular topic. You're already, you know, at night, I was, you're gonna have a lot of basics. This class is from like 0 up. So you might have a lot of basics.
I'm just beginning in that whole thing. It used to be the whole. Now getting back in.
Definitely, I do highly suggest like for like starting, anyway, several UDASI courses I am right now. It's just finding which one is correct for you, and which one is the best. Do you know if there are any other tables that are allowed to use?
Yes, that's what I was trying to get, but I couldn't get here until 6 something, and I was trying to get everything set up.
Yeah, no problem. I mean, I understand running stuff is hard.
Yeah, because tomorrow I'm taking it.
It's live.
Hey, ice! All right, where can we fit another table?
Maybe we like consolidate 2 of these rows and hold up some chairs.
Or just push back those chairs right there, and then we can put, well, those rows were pushed back, okay.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know.
They don't stack. They don't stack.
They do stack.
yeah, that's a good point. Well, they don't really work from what we're doing.
I don't know why this isn't projecting anything. We will figure it out. Yes, maybe.
Right.
I think that little sheet says it should be on.
Yeah, no, I know we've done this like a million times, but that's no guarantee that it works this time.
Past performance is no promise of future results.
Yes, this is true. Right. Okay. Is this gonna do things?
Well, while we're waiting to get started, if you want to get started, I'll be happy to try and work with you.
Thank you.
No problem.
Let's see.
I think if you worked with ADT before, like the Eclipse add-on, the IntelliJ-based Android Studio is much easier to work with. I mean, unless you're really familiar with Eclipse and you're like, oh, it doesn't do my Eclipse things I expect.
I'm not that far.
That's what you had to fall back to last time.
Yeah.
But I know when I very first started working with ADT, it took me a while to get set up, but Eclipse is much easier.
It does things when I do this.
Go get my purse, because, you know, I hate to be too far.
Oh, wait.
It was,
Something?
Remember that we talked about that this morning, or if you're specifically said that's where you want to go?
Okay.
Oh, they moved it. Yeah, clearly something's wrong.
oh, there you are.
Okay, my,
All right.
son of a piece of crap, people. Stop messing with the configuration.
I wonder, I emailed Core, I said Core about the VGA missing. I wonder if he was maybe reconfiguring.
I don't know why it always decides my IDE needs to go into there as well.
Oh, yeah.
Hey, you guys don't need to see that.
But if that led him to.
Thanks.
I'd be extremely surprised.
Thanks, guys. You get to see exactly how much work I have to do all the time. This needs to go over here. And the work you guys need to not be on the screen. And then this I don't care about. What is it?
First question. Oh, if you want to eat, I'll let you go ahead and.
Just give it a sec.
All right, Catherine.
Okay, just want to make sure it works.
When I see stands, because, you know, I guess now it's reduced, but.
Oh, somebody with this. It's no longer faces the things. It needs to face the things.
Right.
So that it is a.
Oh, I'm sorry. It's
okay.
That's the recording device?
Yes, that is that's the sharing device more so. I'm gonna grab some water and use the restroom, and then we'll get started.
So the first thing is, do you know where to get Android Studio?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I already have it. I've got it downloaded.
Okay.
Two of my machines at home.
Okay.
It's working. You're in because this is such a.
Oh, are you gonna use this? You gonna VPN into one of your home machines?
Well, I was. It worked great last time.
Okay. I'll let you work at your own pace, and
The accumulated. Look at that instead.
Wait, that didn't just get removed or something?
the previous classes. I'm not certain if Stacy has these. But however, there should be a website you can get to through the meetup. If not, then you can go directly to. It depends what you want. If you want these exact classes, I think she's got them through the meetup, and I'll have to add them. Udacity also has the general course.
Okay.
Let me get that for you. Just a second. That's in my computer, but I don't remember it.
It was prominently posted up by the front door.
But after.
Yeah. I saw it by the door at my door.
Okay.
Without their.
Yes, that's what I'm getting right now. So just a second, and I'll have it for you. But I have to. Oh.
Well, you got it on the yeah, and everything. Things you need to study.
All right, has everybody eaten some foods?
Right.
Is ready to move? Yay. Okay. Welcome to the 5th session of your 6th session class plus party session. Thank you, brave souls who have made it thus far. I know, it's a lot of work, it's a lot of commitment, and it's every week.
It's dwindled each time, at least live, but,
Yeah, but online it's expanded, which is crazy, because there's been over 100 unique views of just the first session, and you can see how everybody each week the same group of people comes through, because I can see where their IP addresses are coming through.
yeah.
Thank you, YouTube tools. And it's the same people, unless there's a lot of people in Wichita that decided to watch, but
Right.
it's pretty cool.
This is lesson 1, this is lesson 2. We've been done with lesson 1 for a while.
Yeah.
And we did the happy birthday app here, remember?
Oh, yeah.
And in lesson 2, we started to make the Just Java app.
Yeah, the copy ordering app.
So our learner has traversed this long, arduous journey and is right here.
Yep, at the beginning of lesson 3.
Right.
And this is where we need to keep working on the coffee ordering app.
Okay, so before we talk about that, let's just move all of this aside so we can focus on lesson 3 a little bit. Yeah?
Sounds
So I'm
good.
just gonna drag all of these around here.
There, all of this here.
Okay, good.
There's lesson 3.
Okay, how many big ideas are there in lesson 3?
I think you can do 4 big parts.
Yes.
Okay, let's just split these into 4 piles then. There it is. Okay, and what are these ideas?
The first one is methods.
Methods. Okay, well, let's begin here then.
Here's a look at the different stages of the app for this lesson. We'll start by adding an order summary section to the app and understand how methods in Java can help us write more efficient code. Later, we will add a checkbox for a topping like whipped cream to add to our coffee. However, we'll need to understand object-oriented programming to determine the state of the checkbox, whether the user checked it or not, and include that information in the order summary. Within our app, object-oriented programming allows us to dynamically interact with views so that we can read the state from the views and then change the contents of other views while the app is running. We'll add another checkbox for the chocolate topping, and then we'll add a text field so that we can ask the user for their name. Again, we'll write Java code to read in the user input from this field and then display it in the order summary. We'll also learn about control flow statements, particularly something called if-else statements, so that our app has different behavior based on certain conditions. Basically, by looking at what toppings the user wants, we'll be able to adjust the price per cup of coffee either by $1 or $2. Now, the order summary is not that useful if it never leaves the app. So we'll learn about intents in Android so that when the user hits the order button, we can send the order summary out to an email app like this. Then you can specify a specific email address to send it to. We'll end the lesson by covering more topics on Android resources, learning about how to support different languages in the app, such as Spanish. We'll also experiment with changing the styles and theme of the app. For example, you can change the color of the app bar by customizing the theme of the app. There's a lot to cover, so let's get started. So how did you get to work today?
I have a bike. Works out just fine. How about you?
Okay. I drive.
Oh, cool. How's that car working out?
It's good.
Yeah? Do you know how it works underneath the hood?
No, I don't need to. I just need to put the key in and then I drive it.
You know, this is kind of like writing code.
In what way?
Well, everything is kind of like
Okay,
writing code. Like,
yeah.
Stick with me for a second. Right?
Okay.
In previous lessons, we gave students a bunch of code.
Yeah, we gave them methods like the display method and the display price method.
Right? And we kept saying, well, don't worry about this. We'll talk about what it does later.
Mhm.
All that later is now.
Okay.
So much like how you know how a car works, you can use it. Students were able to use that method.
Okay.
Right? But we wrote the method, so we were the designers of the car in that case.
I see. So the main idea is that you can define a method somewhere,
So that's like building the car.
and then later you can call that method.
That's like driving the car.
Yeah.
So let's use those ideas next.
Sounds good. Within the main activity.java file, this is where the display method is defined. And this is where it's getting called, within the increment method and within the decrement method. The instructions of the display method take in a number and then display it on the screen, like this right here. Instead of defining a method, we can also just take the instructions inside of it by copying it and then pasting it where we called that method. And since number is not a variable here, we're going to change it to quantity. If we want to do the same for the increment method, we copy this code and then paste it up here. So this code works the same as we had before, but now we don't need the display method. The disadvantage to this implementation is that we have duplicate code in both methods. Instead, if we define the display method and then we just call it by its name, then we can have less code, which is better for the app. I also want to show you something else that's cool. Anytime you see a method, you can click on it and then right click, and then go to declaration or Command B if you're on a Mac. This scrolls the file to where the method is defined. This is useful because then you can see the actual instructions that are contained within that method. For other methods, it may open up a declaration in the Android framework code. This was written by the Android team, the text view Java file. This shows that even though things may look like magic, you can always trace it back to the lines of code where it was defined, either by you or by someone on the Android team. To help you understand the difference between defining versus calling a method, let's modify the main activity. We're going to change the way a method is defined by changing the name of the display method to the name display quantity. Then for calling this method, do we need to change anything about that code? If these changes cause an error in your app, make sure to address that so that you can run the app on your phone again. Check these boxes when you're done.
Science committees? Yeah, that would be in purple classroom.
You have your laptops out? No? A lot of people are still eating. Why don't we get our laptops out and actually do changes when we were talking about decrement? Call it. All right. Does anybody still need time? What's up? No username. DMS member, not DMS members. Okay. Kind of gotta wait for everybody to put changes in because we're gonna be moving on from this point. So if you still need to eat, I suggest kind of catch up while the button stuff's going up.
But works out just like how you
I guess.
It's good.
Yeah.
Works.
There's some Wi-Fi information posted in the
All right,
email
sorry.
Feedback loop.
on the door.
Change the name.
You want this one,
Okay.
and then that's the password.
Very simple. We just need to make sure everybody's getting on this so that as we move forward, we all have the same code. Then somebody doesn't do this, and they're like, my thing doesn't work, and I'm like, yes, sir. Yes, this code was working last week, and it was also available on the Slack channel, and then also we went through it as part of the online session. So I would suggest going back to the Slack channel and looking for the Git. It's going to be a GitHub link that has most up-to-date code on it.
I think it's on July 19th. It's actually July 19th. That's right here.
I wouldn't grab code from somewhere and this was like it changed.
Display has been changed to
This
display.
big one,
Here,
Unless you might have worked ahead maybe a little bit.
yeah, I'm not sure where I grabbed it from.
Yeah, that might have been from the next link, which is actually coming up. So. Alright, has everybody got it? Resounding yes! Yes! Happy Tuesday, everybody! Come on, it's Tuesday. You made it through Monday. It's all good. You know what? You know what's great? It's only a high of 96 today. It's the end of July, and have you realized how few over 100-degree days we have actually had? That's fantastic. You know what you can do? You can walk outside and breathe.
Yeah, but the humidity's been higher than usual.
Doesn't mean you can't just actually breathe and take your dog for a walk and not have to go, oh no. It's still 99 degrees when I got home, so I can't take the dog for a walk.
I might be more high maintenance. Because I've said that every single day.
Oh, dear.
How long have you lived in Texas?
Hey, September.
15 years.
She said you live even in West Texas where it's more dry. and
Well,
hot.
it's easier to walk the dog when it's dry though. Humidity.
It's okay. I have a fluffy little Bichon dog, and so once it gets too hot, even though she loves to go for a run, she's like anything more than 10 to 15 minutes, done. So done.
Would be perfect.
We keep her really short in the summertime, but you know she is covered with basically
I'll go look and
sweater.
see if they have it.
So
It's on a sign.
I'll go check.
The walker looks.
It may or may not be.
Get there.
But here, I'll go. Oh, first of all, I'll move so you have access, but I can go check
Usually
it
work
quickly.
jobs, very
I don't really need to be here. The only reason I was here is so that I'd be available for you.
You know, yoga pants and
Okay.
whatever you figure out works.
Here, I'll be right back. Let's see if I can find about it.
All right, is everybody up to date? Everybody got everything? Even the screen went crazy. It was like, no, it's been too long. All right. We're gonna click yes. Gotta move on. We've submitted the answer of checkboxes.
Let's do the first task. I'm going to change the name of the display method to display quantity. Now this causes some errors in our app. If I scroll up, I see an error that says cannot resolve method display int. This is actually related to the second task where we asked if you need to change the way that the method is called. The answer is yes, because when we change the name of the method, we need to change the way that it's called. So in the increment method, I'm going to change this to say display quantity, and in the decrement method, I'm going to change this to say display quantity as well. Now there's no more errors in our app, and I can save this and then run the app on the device. And the app works as expected. There's no user visible change, but internally in our code, we did change the method name. Earlier, we saw that we can pass a number into the display method. Let's talk more about the different inputs and output of a method. Let's look at the submit order method in the main activity as an example. Say you have a bunch of lines of code in that method. When the user clicks on the order button, it will trigger the submit order method to be called. The Android device will execute each of these instructions from top to bottom. And when it hits the calculate price method call, it will jump over to where the calculate price method is defined. Say that this is defined at the bottom of the main activity file. The Android device will execute each of these instructions from top to bottom of the method, and then it will jump back to the submit order method. Then it will continue executing these instructions until it hits the end of the method. When the calculate price method is called, we can pass a bunch of inputs over so that when we're executing these lines of code, we can use these input values. As a result of this method, we can pass a single output value back to the caller. That way, the output value can be used in the subsequent lines of code. In Java, we call the inputs to a method input parameters, and we can have 0 or more input parameters. In Java, we call the output a return value, and we can have 0 or 1 return value. An example of an input parameter is passing the quantity over to the calculate price method. That way, this method can use the quantity to figure out the total price of the whole order. Then we can pass that total price back as a return value. And then in the submit order method down here, we can use this total price to do other things like display it on screen or create a receipt or anything like that. So to summarize, this is where we define the calculate price method, and this is where we call it. We want to create a method to calculate the price of a coffee order. Currently, we calculate the price directly in the submit order method, but the logic to calculate the price is going to get a little more complicated, so let's move it into its own method. Then we can call it as many times as we want without copying and pasting the code everywhere. As you gain more experience in Android development, you'll gain better judgment on when to create a new method for something or when you don't need to. This will just come with more experience and more time. So this is the first time we're going to be creating a new method in the main activity on our own. Instead of starting by writing it from scratch, we want to start by learning to recognize what is a correct method by reading some code snippets. So in the instructor notes, we're going to provide you 3 options. Read over these 3 code snippets and determine which option correctly implements the method to calculate the price of the order. When you click on the link in the instructor notes, you'll see this gist that has code for options A, B, and C. The goal here is for you to become comfortable with reading code that you've never seen before. We haven't gone over the exact rules for what makes a valid method, but I want you to make your best guess on which option you think is most correct. I also encourage you to Google search for more information on how to define Java methods. As you click through the different search results, You'll come across information in the documentation that you don't understand, but I want you to become comfortable with not understanding everything on those pages, because it's perfectly normal to not understand everything. All you need to do is just skim the articles for what you understand and what you think is relevant to the problem at hand. So go ahead and read the code for these 3 options, look up some information online, and then make your best guess on how to correctly define the calculate price method.
Alright, guys, I'm gonna send this out. On Slack. Alright, does everybody have it?
Yep.
Now look at the code. Then, I'm gonna give you guys about 2 minutes to look at it. Decide what the answer is. And I will ask you, is it behind door number A, door number B, door number C? They're not doors, and they're not numbers, they're letters. Do you see what I'm trying to stress? Wake you guys up a little bit. Nobody understands my comedy.
Let the inside.
Yes. It's all about the inside. Why is everybody messaging me? I need to quit my messengers. People be talking too much. Oh. This is why wearables are nice, everybody. Just weird, dude. 2 of these look like they're identical. Except for one mistake. Okay. Class, is it A, B, or C?
C.
C. Why is it C?
Because
What's wrong with A?
A doesn't have an ending braces inside the bracket, but after in quantity doesn't have a
Ah, very tricky. It looks good other than that.
And then
Ah.
I
Why is B wrong?
A also has a space limit.
What does B have? No, it does have a return declaration in option B.
No int.
No type.
No return type. Okay. And why is C right? Because it has all the things, right? Because it's not wrong. Sometimes, when it comes to computers, it's not that it's right, it's just that it's not wrong.
Yeah, did we have the special requirements for what C was supposed to do?
I don't know, have we allocated the right amount of points in the sprint for it?
I don't know, do we have a UI?
I really don't know about the wireframes for C.
Okay.
The VDS isn't up to par.
What's the only one about the compile?
We're making a lot of programmer jokes. Woohoo!
The correct answer to this quiz is option C. It's okay if you didn't get the answer though, because
I'm
it
gonna
would,
skip.
C has all the required parts of it. Let's talk more about this next.
You guys got this. That's why I feel like I'm like, nah, you guys.
To figure out why option C was the best in the last quiz, let's review the actual syntax rules of Java for defining a method. This is also known as the method signature. This is the method signature for the calculate price method that we saw earlier. You might be wondering why the order of the words are a certain way. Well, they follow a specific format, and it looks something like this. I know this looks really overwhelming, but don't worry, we're going to go through each one at a time. The first part in this method signature is the word private. This is known as the Java access modifier. It determines who has access to this method to calculate price. The most common access modifiers that you'll see are public or private. This method is marked as private. That means that calculate price can only be called within other methods of the main activity. Outside of the main activity, like in other activities, you won't be able to call this method. It's private to the main activity. On the other hand, if you mark this as a public method, then anyone could call this method, whether you're inside the main activity or you're in other activities. It's kind of like this analogy. If you're a celebrity and public, then everyone knows about you. If you're private and you live inside your house all the time, then only a couple of people know you. So for the calculate price method, we're going to keep it private, so it's only used within the main activity. Next we have int, which is the return data type. Do you remember our diagram from earlier where we said that when you call a method, you pass it inputs and you get an output back? Well, the return data type is the type of data that is returned in the output. And the data types we've learned about so far are int and string from the last lesson. This can also return an object data type, and we'll learn more about objects later in the lesson. In our case, this calculate price method is returning the total price of the order, which is an integer. In a social media app, if I had a method to get the number of friends I have on Facebook, it could return an integer, which is the number of friends. Next, we have the method name, which is calculate price in this case. Just like how we can refer to variables with their name, we can refer to methods with their name so that we can execute the instructions in this method. In the same documentation about defining methods, we can scroll to the bottom and see a section about naming methods. You can read about this in more detail later. Basically, it says that method names should begin with a verb, like run or get or compare or set. It starts with a lowercase letter and then you use camel case if there's multiple words. After the method name, we have the list of inputs, which are denoted within the opening and closing parentheses. You can have as many inputs as you want. If you don't want any inputs, you just have an empty set of parentheses. If you have one input, it looks like this. If you have multiple inputs, you just separate them with commas in between each input. Let's look at the case where we have one input, which is also known as an input parameter. We define an input parameter by specifying its data type and a variable name that we choose for it. So from the diagram of inputs and output, this is going to be the first input to the method. Within this method, then you can refer to the quantity variable, and it's just like any other variable where it already has a value inside of it. The value comes from when you initially called the method and you passed that input in. If we want to modify the method signature to add a second input param, we just have to specify the data type and the variable name for that second input param. Then within this method, we can refer to the quantity or price of 1 cup variables, just like the regular variables. When you call this method, you have to remember to pass the right number of inputs to the method that it's expecting. And the inputs must be of the right data type and in the right order. You can't flip the order of these, otherwise the method is going to interpret them incorrectly. After you list out your inputs, add a closing parentheses and then an opening brace. This starts the list of all the instructions within your method. After all of that, then just add a closing brace to mark the end of your method. Going back to our documentation, now this method declaration will make a lot more sense. First, we have the access modifier, then we have a return data type, the method name, followed by the list of all the inputs. In this case, there are 4 different input parameters, and they each have a data type and a variable name. And then we have an opening brace, the list of all the instructions inside of it, and then a closing brace. And this is a method declaration. In this quiz, you'll have a chance to practice identifying the different parts of a method declaration. We're going to provide some code to you in the instructor notes. The code contains a bunch of methods that could appear in any app. For each case, can you tell me what is the method name, the list of input parameters, and the return data type? Let's do the sample together. Here's an example method. The goal is to create a custom greeting message based on the given name. The return value is going to be a greeting in the form of some text. Now let's ignore the comment for now. First, we have the method name, which is in camel case here, and it says create custom greeting. Next, we have the list of inputs. This is the first input parameter. The data type is string, and the variable name is first name. Next, we have the second input parameter. This is the data type, and this is the variable name. And the two inputs are separated by a single comma, and they're enclosed within the opening and closing parentheses. Then we have the output here. The data type of the return value is string, because we want to return a greeting, which is a string. And this is what it looks like filled into the table. Now go ahead and fill in the blanks for the remaining three methods.
Right. Okay.
All right, post it up, guys. And this time, I'm gonna have actual people come up here and type this in. Scary, you know. The community participation is part of this, right? Why is this being weird? Or you can call it out. You can call it out too. Oh wow, really knows some other things. Okay, so for method 1, what is the name of the method? All right. Okay. And what is the input parameters? Making sure that I'm typing this in. It's hard to type when you can't see your screen. Hey, I did it without, okay. All right, what's the return data type? Somebody? Yay. All right, let's do the same thing on method 2. So, what is the name of the method? Deduct points. What did they do? Right? What's the input parameter?
Int.
And what is our return type? Int. All right. Ooh, method 3 is helper. Okay. Everybody, what is the name of the method?
Find total trip length.
You can do it. I know, talking after hours becomes hard. It's okay, you can't spit up any more food. You already ate it, so it's not going to come out of your mouth. You can talk. All right? All right. Was is our parameters?
Int distance of first trip. Distance of second trip. Until third trip, so same thing for the
Something right.
But the end is
Did I spell things right?
Forgot to
you got the
variable
end.
type.
On the last one? Int. Let's see if I forgot it on the previous one too.
No, you got it.
I know, but I just want to make sure. Ah, see, I did. Okay. All right.
String.
Return type is what?
String.
String. Okay.
Is it string because it's more than one integer being returned?
No, it's string because of the return at the bottom. So like string message, the total trip will be
plus total length plus miles. So what it does is it calculates that total length based off of all the parameters you put in your input parameters, and then it gives you back a string so that you have like a pre-formatted thing of what you were calculating. So you can do what they're showing here is that you can do multiple operations inside of a method and return stuff back that's totally different from the types that you used to put in. So the two are not the same thing. You can it's kind of like you can push in gold and get back silver, or you can they're totally different, right? They're still metals, but they are totally different metals, right? All right. Let's see. Did they accept us? Woohoo!
Let's walk through each of these methods and then fill in the table. And this is what it looks like in the table.
Woohoo! They already did that. Congrats us. Right.
What?
What's wrong?
When did this turn into a cooking show all of a sudden?
Well, since we had to talk about methods.
Care to explain, Rachel, right?
Well, have you ever baked a cake before?
I have eaten a cake before.
Okay, well then you're fully qualified for this.
Okay.
All you have to do to bake a cake is to put in like flour, sugar, and
The ingredients. Okay.
Yeah. And then you follow the instructions of the recipe.
Okay.
And then out comes a cake.
Like this?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, connect the analogy to the methods one more time.
Okay, sure. So for a method, you can put in inputs.
Like we did the quantity for the display method.
Yeah. And then you execute the instructions of the method.
Okay. Almost like the recipe for making a cake.
Mm-hmm. And then you can have the output value returned.
Outputs, they are delicious.
Let's look up more information about input parameters for methods. I'm going to do a Google search for Java method parameter. The first link looks good, so I'm going to click on it. Now this article talks about passing information to a method. Here's a code snippet that computes the monthly payments for a home loan. It has 4 input parameters: loan amount, interest rate, future value of the loan, as well as number of periods with the length of the loan. And then inside this method, we see that we can use these input parameters simply as variables to do our math calculations. When we call the compute payment method, we have to make sure we pass in the inputs in this specific order. So the loan amount has to go first, and then the rate, and so on. For the quiz in this section, you'll have a chance to review this article in more detail. Within the main activity of the Just Java app, we're going to be modifying the display quantity method and the input parameter to give you some practice. Notice that in the decrement method of our app, when we call the display quantity method, we're passing the quantity variable over as input to this method. But the input parameter is called number, so whenever we want to refer to this input, we just have to say number. Now technically, we could have used the global quantity variable within this method instead of passing it as an input parameter. But for the purposes of teaching you about input parameters, let's just leave it like this. I can change this call to the display quantity method so that I pass as input the number 30. This is valid because it still matches the input data type. So in the decrement method, when we call display quantity, it will jump down here and it will execute these instructions, and the variable number will have a value of 30. I'll run it on my device to show you. So now when I hit the minus button in the app, it will display a quantity of 30 here. So let me try that. There, and it actually happened like that. I can also create a different variable and pass that as an input to the method. Here I created a local variable called SumQuantity, and I initialized it to 100. I pass this variable as input to this method, and now the number variable inside here has a value of 100. Let me run this on the device. Now I expect that when I hit the minus button, the quantity will update to 100, and it does. These are just some things you can do to experiment with passing in different inputs to a method. As you work with input parameters, another term that you might come across is arguments. When you call a method, the inputs being passed to that method are called the arguments. Now, this is kind of a funny word because when you think of arguments, you think of people yelling and cursing at each other, but this is not like that. Arguments are simply the inputs being passed to a method. Input parameters are the actual inputs in your method declaration, and those are the variables that are used within your method. So that's the slight difference between input parameter and arguments. In any case, go ahead and read the article in the instructor notes about method parameters. Then go ahead and experiment with the code in your app. First, try to rename the number input parameter within the display quantity method declaration. Just simply give it a different variable name. Then go ahead and fix any errors and then run the app again. For the next task, go ahead and change the data type of the number input parameter from an int to something else like string. Observe what happens, then go ahead and undo the change. If you want to experiment with other things, go right ahead. For example, if you have a question, what would happen if I do X? Then just go ahead and try it.
All right. So this is probably one of those really good things for you guys to read. Now, honestly, you may not have the most amount of time right now to be able to go through them, but there's a lot of things to know about the way that declarations are handled. And I know that these words sound kind of funny sometimes, especially if you don't have programming experience. I declare, this is a declaration. It doesn't, really what we're saying is, all right, you hand me this, think of it as a money transaction, right? When it comes to methods. Like, you hand me this, I hand you this. You give me $2, I give you 1 dozen eggs. You said you came to me because I'm the egg vendor, you handed me money, I handed you eggs. Think of it kind of like that. You have an input and an output. Everything in society pretty much works based off of an input and an output, right? You buy lunch for your friend because, you know, you continue to get back friendship, right? I mean, it's not like it's always that way, right? But it's, some of the terminology doesn't make sense. But just think of everything as very transactional, very like normal societal type thing. Don't pay attention so much to the jargon. So I'll send out the link. Woohoo! All right, so here, let's see what happens if you change number. If you change number to any other name, what happens? What starts to freak out? Does everything freak out? The world ends? Your app dies?
Or just use within that function.
What happens? Looking over your shoulders. The worst manager in the world. Such a micromanager. You listen, you. I'm the boss of the micromanager. No, I actually kind of gave it to my, like, project manager's manager. So. Things are in biz validate. They shouldn't be sitting in my queue.
You're still there, so that's good.
Well, because then the manager, project manager goes, so what's the status on that? I don't know. It's up to you to decide whether you like it or not. So don't you know what's on your queue? Oh no, because it still shows up on your queue. I view that as your component. Yeah, it works out. I usually tell a joke as part of it to explain why the system is like needs change. That's the way. That's a very common thing that happens. But it's just a smooth. Oh yeah, you can totally do that. You can make a joke. If you can joke while getting a point across, you will. It's very hard to make people angry, unless you've outwitted them. If you've made them look stupid, and they're like, if it's funny at somebody else's expense, then that doesn't work. But you can make a point.
Project manager, you integrated me.
Yeah.
Take that into account on your next review, Stacy.
Who cares? What are you gonna do, demote me? Not exactly that high up on the food chain anyway. Where do I go? Like,
You're gonna be demoted to no longer being an innovator. You're just
no, not that. Anything but that. Because labels that work provides are so part of who I view myself to be.
I can't use the word innovator.
I just innovate like a normal person. No, I just think that's funny. There's some people who really like the titles and all that. that stuff really matter.
Yeah, that's-
I was probably creative specialist for like a year.
Well, creative specialist?
Creative specialist, like we were marketing, but we didn't want to say we were marketing for some reason. So we said creative specialist.
You know why? Because marketing is very broad.
Yeah, I was like, I write email blast.
Really?
Yeah, you are in marketing.
That's supposed to be underscores, but okay. I mean, if they would.
All right, is everybody done? Number one, rename the number input. Something interesting. Yes, no, yes?
Yes.
It's all yes? Resounding yes? Okay. And then, what if you make a number? A string of number. What happens?
Was,
What happens? What happens? Somebody's gotta tell me what happens.
cannot find number.
Is that what it says?
That's what it should say. I'm not sure what we're supposed to be changing it, but that's what it should
So if you make number into a string, what happens?
say. No, we name number, right?
Well, we already did number one. What happens in number two? If we change the data type of number from int to string, what happens?
Get an error on the call.
Goes on an ink.
Or the prototype. It should be incompatible types of errors.
Yeah, you're gonna have type problems. Right. Then you move something. Okay. Gosh, everybody stop. Do you know how my life is now? How many messages have I gotten and it's after hours? This is my work computer. It doesn't even have personal stuff. That's fine. It's all really good. What is going on?
Let's do the first
Let's skip.
or two input parameters or more. I'm going to walk you through an example of a method with a different number of input parameters. I started by creating a new app from the project wizard in Android Studio. So this is completely unrelated to the Just Java app. I added this method in the main activity. It's called create weather message. There's no input parameters, and the return value is a string. This method is supposed to create a new message that specifies the city name and the temperature. You can think of a method as being a template of instructions. So I can make temperature be an input parameter. And it's a number, so I'm going to say int temperature. And then I can use this right here. So this is a string literal, and then it's concatenated with the temperature integer, and then it's concatenated with another string that says degrees Fahrenheit. So now the message can be customized based on the temperature because it's an input parameter. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention this earlier, but in the onCreate method of the main activity, which is called when the activity gets created, I can call the create weather message. Before I passed in no arguments, but now we have one required parameter. So I'm going to pass in 77 for the temperature. Now that makes the error go away, and this method call is correct. The other thing I should modify is this comment on the method. I'm going to add a blank line, and then I'll start to describe the input parameter, which is temperature here. I'm going to type add param temperature, and then I can add a description saying that this is the temperature of the city. Sometimes the parameter names are a little hard to understand, so that's why the description is useful. Other times, if your method is public, then other people will be able to call this method, and they might not know what are the instructions inside this method, so reading this Java doc and the description of the parameters is really useful to them. I mentioned earlier that a method is like a template. So what if we want to change the city so that it's not always San Francisco? I can make city be an input parameter. I can just add a comma here. And since city name is text, I'm going to make it a string data type. Then I can delete San Francisco and replace it with the variable city name. And remember to add a space before and after here as well. Cool, so now this method can create a message that's customizable to a certain city and temperature. I also remember to modify the Java doc so that it has this extra parameter and description for a city name. Since I changed the method signature, now I have an error up here. The method no longer works with just one argument. I need to pass in 2 arguments. So I add a comma and then pass in San Francisco string. Now the error goes away. So when I call create weather message, 77 is going to be the value of temperature and San Francisco will be the value of city name. And it will create the proper string here. Now we're going to go back to the calculate price method and we're going to modify the method signature so that it has a different number of input parameters. We're going to define it with 0 input parameters, 1 input parameter, and lastly try it with 2 input parameters. You'll see how changing the method signature here to have a different number of input parameters will affect the way the method is called. Normally, when you're building your app, you will just define it one way with a certain number of input parameters. And usually that number of input parameters is going to be determined based off of what's happening inside the method. The best practice is to only pass input parameters that you're actually going to need inside this method. There's no point in passing over more information if you're not going to use it inside here. Here are the instructions for this task. First, define the calculate price method in your app in the main activity. See the instructor notes for a code snippet that you can start with. We're going to modify the calculate price method so that it only has 1 input parameter. Then in the submit order method, call calculate price and pass in quantity as the input. Then try to modify the calculate price method to have 2 input parameters. That way, in the submit order method, you'll call calculate price quantity, and then you can pass in the price, which could be $10, for example. And lastly, try changing calculate price so that it has 0 input parameters. That way, in the submit order method, you would just call calculate price like this. Let's do the first one together so you understand what I mean. I'm going to open up the link in the instructor notes. In this gist, we've provided code for the calculate price method. So go ahead and select everything and then copy it. In Android Studio, I'm going to paste in this method. I'm just going to paste it in right below submit order. And I'll make sure that there's a blank line in between each method here. That makes it easier to read. Then I can call this method from the submit order method. I'm just going to insert the call at the very bottom of the method. Later, we're going to integrate it with the code up here. But for now, this is good. Oops, I forgot that we have 1 input parameter, so I need to pass quantity. Now do the same for the remaining 2 tasks by modifying the input parameters here. To complete this task, if you need examples to reference, you can always do a Google search for Java methods.
Okay, let's do it, guys. Let's put in cookies. Now remember, we already got this earlier, but this is where we had the 3 different methods and actually decided which one was the working one. So you can also grab it from that. So here it is. So first copy paste that into your code, into your main activity Java code. Hey guys, how you doing?
Not paying attention.
No, I already did that.
See, this is what happens. Your dad's on the other side. You're like, oh, he's not. Did you notice how strategically he can view both of what you guys are looking at, even though you're on the opposite side of the room?
Giving him away.
That's dadding. That's what a dad does. He could have sat anywhere. Like, I want to see how they do this by themselves. They think I'm not paying attention. I'm always, I always see you just kind of doing this. Doing the little tilt, just to make sure. All right. So, let us have the calling of 1 input parameter, which it would be calculate and then price. So let's assume we stick with the base method that we just copied and pasted in, right? And then I pass it quantity from submit order. And then see what happens. So what happens there? What happens?
So we want all three methods or only one by one?
We'll do one by one. So when we're talking about one input parameter, we're taking the method that we just called and put in the method that we just copy and pasted into our main activity. But here we're actually going to call it from within submit order. So at the bottom of submit order, we're going to call calculate price and pass in the number that we have, quantity, right? The number variable quantity. So that basically does what? It has it operate exactly like how we expect it to operate based off of what we had previously gone through when we went through the first, second, and third methods, right? So in case 2, what would I have to do to make case 2 work? So 2 input parameters. So if we had 2 input parameters for calculate price, we would have quantity and then 10, which represents price. So in that scenario, what we would have to do to make that work is we would have to change the method, calculate price, to accept 2 inputs, right? 2 input parameters. The first would be the integer quantity, and the second would be another integer, which would be 10, which represents the price. Now, what would that 10 go into? What would that 10 replace in your method? What would that new input parameter replace in your existing calculate price method?
The constant 10.
The constant 10. Why would I want to do that?
So you can change it one time.
Yeah, so I could change the price, right? So if I go to a cheaper coffee shop, maybe I can do my calculations and I can adjust the price and I can still use the same math and the same methods, but now I have the ability to kind of move that around. I didn't keep that variable just in that one place. It's a good idea to have because, again, if I hit another coffee shop, they have different coffees. Or if I move to California, it's going to be more expensive, right? Yes, Starbucks in California is actually more expensive. Somehow a caramel macchiato was $5.32. Wasn't even a large.
Everything is expensive.
It's like, oh, I'm like going, this is a full breakfast price for the price of
Oh,
coffee.
yeah, well, they raised the prices twice in 2013. I don't know what they've done since then.
I don't know, California just keeps going up there. The only reason why I went to Starbucks is there's literally no other option. For any, like, putting who's walking. It's interesting how they, San Francisco's like, oh, we're all about the boutique everything. You cannot find an independent coffee shop safe, but I think it's all Starbucks. And then all of the independent shops for concession items and things, they all carry the same organic local home brands. So I still don't see what the point is. Best way I can describe San Francisco in my experience is prepackaged authenticity. Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay. Now you guys know how I feel about San Francisco. Sorry guys, wouldn't move there. You'd have to offer me an obscene amount of money.
Yeah, and then you could rent an apartment, maybe.
Oh, I'm talking obscene amount of money. I'm like, it's gotta be, because I calculated it out to find out what it would be for me to move directly to San Francisco or Mountain View. I would need to make 2.7 times what I make now.
Yeah.
Which would also mean my husband would also have to make 2.7 times. And if that was true, I would just be regretting that I wasn't just Donald McDuck, I got it. Or Scrooge McDuck, swimming in the coins of money, because I would just be like,
It's hard to find a cheaper metropolitan area than Dallas.
That you want to live in.
Yeah. Oh yeah, OKC's cheaper than Dallas.
So my guess is when you view those the YouTube stats on where people are viewing from, you're probably going to be -1 from San Francisco Mountain View.
I'm sorry, San Francisco, no. San Francisco, no. It's cool. I don't mind going there. But you're walking to a conference. Obviously, you don't live there, and there's people from San Francisco go, you're the problem with San Francisco. Why? Because I came in with tourist dollars, spent money, and then left? Like, well, apparently I'm your problem. Yep, it's just an ironic place. And it's ironic not in like a Sheryl Crow way. It's just ironic in like a crazy grandma kind of way. Like kooky for no reason.
We already did one input param, or if you create local variables here, you can refer to those.
Woohoo!
We just finished calling a method and passing in inputs.
Oh wait, are you referring to passing in quantity to what was it, the calculate price method?
Exactly. And now we want to get a return value out of it.
I love return values. What is going to be, I think, the price, because it's the calculate price method?
Yeah, the total order price is going to be the return value.
Or let's do that.
Okay. So you need a fork.
Do what?
In Java, the output of a method is known as a return value. In code samples, you may have seen the word return inside the method or seen the word return in the comment above it. Let's look up more information about the return values for methods. I'm going to do a Google search for Java method return value. The first link looks good. This article talks about returning a value from a method. It says that a method is finished being executed when we've completed all statements in the method or all lines in the method, or when we've reached the first return statement, whichever one comes first. A method will also end if we've thrown an exception or an error, but we're not going to cover that in this course. We're mostly going to focus on the first two cases. So in the code, you might see something like return semicolon. That means the method should end and any lines of code that come after this won't be executed. Alternatively, you might see something like this, return and then a value, semicolon. This is returning an output value from the method. Here's an example. This is code for the getArea method. It's supposed to compute the area of a rectangle, which is defined as width times height. So inside the method, we have the word return followed by the return value. The return value is the variable width times the variable height, and this equals a single number, and that number is returned as the output value for this method. Unlike input parameters, where you can have as many input parameters listed in between the opening and closing parentheses, you can only have a single return value, and the data type of that return value is specified here. So we could have returned any other number as long as it's an integer. For example, you can't return a string because that doesn't match the int data type. You're probably realizing by now that Java has a special meaning for the word return. You can't use it for the name of variables or methods. These are called Java keywords. I can search for the Java keywords list. This is the list of all the Java keywords. You'll notice that some of the words we've already seen before, like int, public, and private. It's a pretty short list, and all these words have a special meaning in Java when you put them in your code. So that means you can't use them for identifiers, like variable names or method names in your app. And you'll also notice that return is a special Java keyword. This is reserved for when you want to return an output value from a method. Going back to our earlier example of creating a weather message, we can create a string and then return it by saying return message. The data type of this variable is string. What would happen if I added a line of code after this return statement? Well, then I would get an error that says unreachable statement, because the computer won't get to these lines of code after the return statement because it would have ended the method at this point. So delete any lines of code that come after your return statement. What if you don't need your method to return any output value? Well, let's look at a couple of examples in the main activity of the Just Java app. The increment and decrement methods are examples where there is no return value. When you call the decrement method, it does all of its hard work in updating the UI in the display quantity method. There's no output value to return. And same with the increment method. All the hard work is done when you call display quantity and it updates the screen. You might be wondering where the return statement is then. Well, the method will finish executing when all of the lines of code have been completed, or when it hits the return statement. So I could have added return semicolon like this. That way the method would finish as soon as it hits this line. This gives me a warning in Android Studio. It says return is unnecessary as the last statement in a void method. Since I'm not returning anything, I can just delete this line here. This is less lines of code and it's easier to read, so I prefer it like this. To indicate that there is no return value, it's important in the method signature to say that the return data type is void. Void just means that there's no return value. Java has a special way of representing this, so that's why this is a Java keyword. Let's look back at our Java keywords list, and indeed we see that void is in this list. So if you don't have a return value, make sure you don't just leave it blank like this, because otherwise there's a Java syntax error. Just type void with a lowercase v. Go ahead and read this article on your own now. You can skim it for the information that you do understand, or Google search for more information online. Once you've learned a couple of things from this article, you can move on to the tasks. In the instructor notes, you'll find a link to some code for 4 different methods. Each method contains an error, and the task is for you to find the error in each of these methods. Since there's multiple ways to fix the code, assume that the java.com comment at the top of each method is correct, and we want to make the code match that. This is what the methods look like. Identify the line number that the error is on. The line number is located in the left-hand column here. Then write a short description on why that line has an error. So line number goes here and description goes here. When you're done, you can continue to the solution video.
Right. Hey everybody. Wakey wakey. Whoa. Okay. So let's get the documentation out there first so that everybody has that. This reference material is good. And then let's get to the 4 methods, everybody. All right, you ready? Go. Go, 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 go. All right. So, what line is the error? Line 4? 8. Okay. Like, that doesn't look great. All right. So we're going to go with 8. And what's the problem? What's the problem with it? 2 doubled returns. All right. Now let's look at method 2. What line is method 2?
6.
All right. What's the problem with it?
No return type.
No return type. Okay. Method 3.
4.
And what's the problem?
It says nothing instead of
Not a return type.
Well, and the function name is not, the method name is not that either.
Setup is a valid method name.
What is nothing?
That's a type. It's not a type. Nothing is nothing at all.
Am I allowed to make an object called nothing? Like, any good practices?
There is something in like some weird deviation of Smalltalk that does that, but it's a different thing. All right, method 4. What is the problem?
So return the wrong type. Line 7.
Line 7, and you said
Return the wrong type.
returns the wrong type.
Return type doesn't match with the.
Returns the wrong type. Submit. Woohoo! It says especially the last
The first method is about getting the email account name. The method
Right,
should
let's
return
go
a
through
string which is the name of the account. So far, the method signature looks good. We have the access modifier, the return data type, and the method name, and no input params. We have an opening and closing brace as well. The first line of code looks correct. It returns a string in quotes, and then it has a semicolon. So this is the return value. However, the problem comes on the second line when we see another return statement with another return value. We learned earlier that you can't have lines of code after the return statement because those will be considered unreachable by the computer. So in this case, this method has an error on line 8. Okay, so let's do method 2 now. The second method is about adding $4 of tip onto the current bill. The current bill is an input parameter and the data type is integer. The return value of the method should be the total price of the bill with that $4 of tip included. So let's check the method signature first. We have an access modifier. We're missing a return data type, so that's weird. And then we have the method name and one input parameter. So the return data type is a red flag, but let's keep reading. Inside the method, it says return bill plus 4 and semicolon. So this is the return value. Bill is a variable, and we add 4 to it. So this evaluates to a single value, and then that is an integer, which should get returned. So we're missing the word int right here, and this is on line 6. So in the table, we say that method 2 has an error on line 6, and we're supposed to specify the return data type of int. Let's look at the third method. This method is about setting up the app for our current city. We don't have the code for the other app, but let's just look at the code for this one method. The method signature starts with private access modifier, and then it says nothing, which is weird because we haven't seen that before. And then the method name is called setup. There's no input parameters, and we have an opening and closing brace. Inside the method, we see that there's a variable. It looks like a global variable, city name, and it's being set to the string London. Okay, well, from everything that I've observed, there's basically no return data type specified in the comment here. It looks like we're trying to return nothing as the output. So remember that the Java keyword for returning nothing is the word void. So I think the error is on line 4 here when we need to say void. Okay, so I added that to the table. Now let's move on to method 4. This method is about getting the number of students in a class. The return value is the number of students, which is an integer. The method starts with an access modifier of private, and then the return data type is an int. So far it's looking good. The method name is getStudentClassSize, and there's no input params. Inside the method, we have the return keyword, and then it says 20 in quotations. But this is weird because this is a string, and we wanted to return an integer. So the error is on line 7, where we have to return 20 without quotations. And this is what your table should look like.
Woohoo! Yay, everybody.
Let's go back to the calculate price method. Once we call this method, it's going to return the total order price, and we can store this value inside this variable called price. Then we can display it on the screen. To integrate the calculate price method into our app, we're going to need to use return values. Let's look at the pseudocode first. Within the submit order method, we want to call the calculate price method. It's going to compute the total price of the order, and it's going to return that as an output. So we're going to store that output into an integer variable called price. Then we're going to take that price and then display it on the screen. Let's look at the actual Java code for that. In the submit order method, we would add this line of code. Do you remember the assignment operator from lesson 2? Whenever I see this, I evaluate the right-hand side first. The calculate price method returns a single value, which is the order price, and that should get stored inside this local variable called price. Then we can call another method, display price, and the input to that method is going to be the price variable that we just created. This is the first time we're seeing how a method can be used as part of an expression. For example, we can call this method, and the value that gets returned from that can be added to other numbers, or if it was a string, we can concatenate it to other strings. All that matters is that the whole thing on the right-hand side gets evaluated to a single value and then gets stored on the left-hand side variable. But for the Just Java app, we're just going to use calculate price directly and show that on screen. For this coding task, you'll be making sure that the calculate price method is getting defined and called properly in the Just Java app. First, focus on how the method is defined. Modify the calculate price method to have the correct return data type in the method signature. Also assume that there's 0 input parameters. The next step is to modify the inside of that method. Make sure that it's returning the correct price of the total order, which is the quantity of cups ordered times the price per cup. You can assume that each cup of coffee costs $5. You can just hard code that directly into this method. Once that's all done, then you can move on to how the method is getting called. Call calculate price from the submit order method, and you can use the code that we talked about earlier. Then go ahead and display this price on the screen. Now you could use the display price method, but you did a lot of work at the end of lesson 2 to show some text on the screen as well. It also said thank you, so if you could try to integrate this price value with that text, that would be most ideal. It should look something like this. So if you change the quantity and then hit order, then the price shows up here along with the text. When you're done, check these boxes to continue.
All right. Let's do it. Let's do it, everybody. We can do it. I know. There's many things they have listed. So first, let's make sure that calculate price has the correct return type. Everybody got it? So now what we need return price to do is to take the quantity and multiply it by the price per cup, which is how much in our case? $5. $5 for a cup of coffee. The world is so expensive now. You know, it's funny because their coffee's not even good. Oh, if you want really good coffee, I found this really good one that it's got a lot of caffeine, but it tastes good, and it brewed black is like, at first I thought I overbrewed it and it was going to taste like burnt sludge, because it's like jet black. And no, it was quite tasty. It's called Death Wish coffee. That's terrible. It's a good tasting. They made their own variety of like coffee beans or something, their own roasting method that preserves most of the caffeine, but it's got a kind of like it's more full-bodied, I would say more of a medium roast flavor than it is a dark roast flavor. Not better really at all. It's called Death Wish coffee. It's actually extremely popular. They made an entire coffee company off of selling just one variety of coffee, so you know it's pretty good. You can get it off of Amazon right now. I know. I finally tried it after getting recommended it by like 3 friends, and then I saw a special deal on it pop up in my like stream, and now that's like my morning coffee. Even though we have like the grind and brew Starbucks machine at work, I use that. That's my second cup of coffee. My first cup of coffee is like the proper French press stuff in the morning, and then I'll have a cup of the weaker stuff, and then I just 2 cups of coffee is my norm. At worst 3. It has to have been like a really bad day.
In New Zealand, they have a pizza chain, Hell Pizza.
What?
Pizza chain name is Hell Pizza.
Yeah, I've also seen, and forgive me for saying this in here, but it's called, there's 2 things. Drunk ass plumbing. Like, I don't know why, but it was a drunk plumbing. It's the, okay. And then the other one is Big Ass Fans.
Okay, so
they're a very popular commercial fan company. They make those big ones
Nothing-
that they
so
put in
if
like
you-
warehouses
another
and stuff,
your app to go to?
and they're called just big ass ones. The donkey. Well, that was funny. That's one thing. That's big. Yeah, it is.
Left over from something.
And they actually have them in the airport in Brazil and stuff.
But this looks
So when
great.
you look up,
I'm just not
see-
certain.
you just see curse marks.
Gosh, though, your computer's really struggling with it. Like,
So this is a dumb question. When you first type a
Might partly
function
because of that
and,
too.
and you go and start to call the vendors.
But, I mean,
Since it's
Basically,
open,
and
you
usually
can
I'll go
catch
to get
the other one open.
the semicolon like right then. But
You know,
when you come back, you don't get the hint of the function parameters. How do you get that to pop up
see if I can-
again?
So for me, I just like will start like I'll just delete one character and then I'll just keep going and then it comes back.
Oh, so you, okay.
I don't just try to guess. I just backspace, I think again. Because that happens to me all the time. Because I think once you start doing big apps, you start having like 50 different utility files
Just made with a
with different kinds of utilities for every
activity.
little thing. So
And I
That
changed
makes
the
sense.
title slightly
Mhm.
to like
Our
intelligence.
typing something, it'll
This
give you
particular
suggestions, but if
activity.
you type the
Mhm.
lowercase letter instead of a capital letter, all of them.
I only
you have
showed
to actually do the whole string and
Oh.
yeah,
Mhm.
it's really.
the whole world.
that reminds me of Peter Griffith when he gets hit in
on
the
the
knee.
emulator. Or if you put it on a device.
I haven't got it to actually run on an actual virtual device.
Yeah, because it's IntelliJ
Yeah.
under the hood.
That one,
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah,
So
so
I could write my all my Java
when I go to
files and-
run it on that,
I don't know if I like that, but yeah.
so yes, Android Studio is built
It
on
might
top
be
of
just a
IntelliJ. In
performance
fact,
issue,
if you get the
because,
Android
you know,
plugin for
this
IntelliJ,
computer
it's
not being able
basically
to
Android
handle
Studio.
both at the same time.
That-
You probably don't have a real device either that you we could do that, but you have to get
Yes.
the drivers for it, which isn't terrible.
Although
but
Aptana is
might be a little bit slow.
Ellipse. Does that explain something? That's also why Aptana for an
But,
HTML editor
It's
is like
sometimes something that helps us
a
to
3
start
gigabyte
your
download.
device,
I
your
downloaded that because I didn't have because I couldn't find a
Android virtual device first, so it's all up and going,
Slime
and then
Dash.
deploy and
Yes,
faster.
And Jay added,
Just doing that,
and
I
you
did
know,
not know what that
the
was.
device is started, I mean, it's still slow, but at least you're not waiting for it when you're trying to deploy.
Yeah.
So you might try that. If we go to, okay,
Well,
so,
but all of the graphs in my classes were taught in class.
Just- oh, no, is, I think that is all your,
And then all of the non-Mac labs had Windows 8 installed, so I couldn't figure out how to use that.
I haven't used Windows as my main for quite some time. Although apparently before this weekend is out, I need
let me
to
check real quick, which
currently
I should know off the top of my head, which is the ADB manager,
Yes, I
but
did do that at work the other day. I was very nervous, but it actually it's kind of okay. Except it forgets all of the wireless networks that you have, and it
Oh, that's not a big deal.
It clears
I
everything.
literally only ever hooked it up to like
Okay.
it is the Windows instance is only for games on Steam. And I don't even really play them that often. Except for our Rocket League. We have a company, Rocket League.
but yeah, Android Studio is cool.
We have won 2 of our series out of
Pretty
6.
demanding. but it is
I love my
what it
partner.
is. So, okay, this is-
At least it's a funny story.
It is pretty funny. Yes, madame. Oh, now we have the soft, lucid tones of something that we don't really want. Okay. So if we call calculate price from submit order, can I see what happens in your virtual device? Show me what happens in your virtual or your real device. Display it on the screen. Make it calculate the price and tell me that you
ADB
have the
manager,
price.
then you might be able to start
Do you want to
like the
display
device
your
first.
I'm just kidding.
I want everything. You don't know this. I want all the things. Not really. That's a lot to manage.
But you know where you put it all, right?
I'm just wondering, like what would you want to do if you had all the
But yeah, you
things?
can go ahead and start it up first.
Like,
and
and
then
all the things includes like cure for
let it
cancer,
burn.
like, I mean, all the things include stuff that doesn't exist yet, as well as mythical beings, you know, like, all the things, a herd of unicorns, you know, like,
Home, if
So
you want
just
to make
make
a
it
little
real
craft store,
all the things you
there's
know.
also something called.
it would make the world extremely boring.
Although actually,
Right, show me,
at home is
show me
just
the
a little
display
faster,
price,
but also
thank
something
me,
called
thank me for my order, I have given you money.
So that emulator, third
You're
party,
absolutely
it's good for if you want to be a business, for, you know, hobbyists and people who just are doing small things, it's free. But I do a lot of work on the actual device too.
What you got?
Do you have an Android?
What you got?
Oh, sure.
Another goes, another goes,
Is it
another
the one
one
with you
bites the
that you want to deploy to?
You don't find.
Well, you, I mean, if it's your actual phone, you might. I was saying that I've got a cable on that.
It's pretty cool. Alienware's work.
If you want to deploy to,
Like, is this their new thinning light?
Okay.
Is it shop?
It's,
Is it on the docking
now since
station?
this is Windows, you'll have to probably get some
Graphics
drivers.
card?
But still, it's nice to
and also you can get,
at least have something running.
graphics space that you can attach to it.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, I ordered it, I had it a year and a half actually. So, I like it.
Yeah, because a lot of times the Alienware
There's the work.
super gamerific. Like, you know what I mean? Like, this looks like just
You mean like how the.
like a normal person. Yeah, it doesn't have, it basically doesn't have
There you go.
Voltron smashed into the hood. Does that make sense? Like,
Tap
I
on
want 10 million
Oh, to make
angles
it
with
the Delta
fake
version? Yeah.
metal all over the place. And then lights coming out of fins that are on the lid. I know, it's just very, very like demure.
My nephew was actually surprised because whenever I opened it up, it's like.
Oh, yeah.
They're very fast.
What kind of floor is it?
Yeah, that is,
You
that's why I got the Amazon Ghost Pro. Also, I wanted the ability to put in so many drives.
I thought it was that one.
For no reason other than I could. You know, I have a lot of hobbies, but a lot of them I don't lose money on, so I really, computers, but like,
Doesn't work
games,
with
you don't really lose money on,
something like that.
especially vintage video games.
Intelligently or.
I work with, okay, so I do. Okay, so I work with the Android Studio, which is based on another platform. It's based on IntelliJ, but it's not the same important.
So I do a little bit of stuff on the side with that.
But yeah, I do use Android Studio.
Yeah. That's, it's your beer money. That's
Yeah, I
right.
used to use ADT, the Eclipse-based one, but I really
Well,
like
like-
the IntelliJ.
Debt free and almost 30, and I got debt free before 30.
I don't really count a loan that's less than
Is it a
10%.
Samsung
Of like, less than
Galaxy
2% loan that's
Core?
under like a couple grand, not being debt free.
Oh, like
Because I'm like,
yeah.
it's really not, it's less than the rate of inflation, so it's not even worth me to pay. But it's basically, I'm under 29. I'm debt free. Other than a house, but that'll be paid off in like 7 years, by the way. Yeah,
Ours we paid off in.
and we got a 2.7% loan on our house. So, no, we did it 25 and then worked the plan out with them to pay it off. You could do that. What? No, we just had really good credit.
Wow, yeah.
Come on, internet.
Really?
But we got it, and we got it right before like the market turned in Dallas to be like
So 3 years ago.
3.5 years ago, yeah.
Yeah, I was looking at that, man, how home prices, drool, and I was just creeped up.
No, our house is worth like, okay, so we bought it for $220, and now
Holy
like,
smokes.
we got a really good deal at $220, but like,
Yeah,
still.
didn't know 50 up or.
Very, very little. We've done, okay, we added tab
Maybe I
16 plus
I did.
cabling and extra grounding. Oh yeah, we did the whole, we did the wiring. We put in Ethernet everywhere in the house. There's PoE access points. So you can walk around the house and not have any loss of Wi-Fi.
System.
And everything is grounded, welded equipment,
I don't want to turn
commercial
off the
grade, so, and then double grounding wires outside, and then fiber direct to the house. And then we've also added
Like
some other
copper into the
reinforcements.
house, right?
Yeah, it goes straight to the switch. So fiber channel goes up the thing on the side of the house and then goes into the, no copper coaxial. Fiber into a switch.
Yeah, well, mine has fiber to the house.
It's barely a switch on this one. They're saying it's a switch.
The box, yeah, we have no box. Oh wait, no, we do have a box, but it's only for the TV. It doesn't actually do any of our internet
We have
services.
a decoder, the fiber to the outside, and then that decoder.
Apps, settings, about phone,
to the
build number.
Yeah, we don't have,
Field.
Nice.
so none of that external software, surfboard, Foxis, 3D
Get
crap.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6,
Just
there we
like,
go.
give me all your internet. I want to make it all mine. I'm gonna pay for that.
Yeah.
Might as well get every last bit. Okay, so can you show me what it looks like on your display?
Powered by the intelligent.
Display.
Yep.
Show it. Show me.
It says it's saying that the ID inside this.
Yeah, that's fine. Is that a picture of another brother?
If you restart it from the phone instead of restarting it from Android Studio, you get that message.
Yeah, if you restart from the phone instead of from Android Studio, you can sometimes get that message. Also, try plugging it, taking it out of the plug and then plugging it back in. That also happens. Remember that this is part of that instant apps thing, and sometimes it just misses stuff. A lot, actually. Is that been your experience, Jen? Instant apps does not always work correctly, and sometimes it becomes, I need to unplug the things, replug it in.
It's not ready for consumption yet.
But they pushed it out to everybody. Ugh. It's not ready
Well,
for
have you
mass
have
consumption,
you
but
happened to you yet where it's like you want to deploy it, but you've deleted it, and it's like, no, it's deployed, and it won't deploy it, and then you have to like tell it to debug.
Yes,
so it'll
yes.
deploy
I've
it.
also had the thing where it's like missed data and it didn't make a new install. It tried to lightning over something when I had uninstalled it. Because that happens a lot. Granted, it probably saves more time overall because most of the time it works, but when it doesn't work, you're just like, because compile times for complicated apps, even with like app cache, all this other stuff, you can have compile times that are like even fully optimized at like 3 minutes.
It takes me like 3 to 5 minutes to compile whenever I need to do something at work.
Yeah, so that's why you got to put the dedicated caching and all the other options. If you haven't done all the optimizations, you only have yourself to blame.
It's true. It's true. So painful.
But then you don't get to tell somebody, but wait, my code's compiling. I can't do anything. My code's compiling. Do you hear that very often? Project manager, do you hear, oh, I would love to work on that, but my code's compiling. Like
One of my friends actually wrote a program that would send him a text message when the code was done.
If you compile the Android operating system on a dual quad-core Xenos processors.
Yeah, I just think that it's
with
just too much for this
at least
machine.
64 gigs of RAM running all SSDs in a ZFS system, it still takes about
So it's
3 to
just
4 minutes
painful,
to compile the
painful,
operating
painful.
system.
I'm certain your non-laptops at home are
I
probably
made a text him when I was done.
much better.
He's like, I'm gonna go get a comic book. I'll be back when you're done compiling.
Yeah, I had the thing where I was compiling OS stuff
Oh,
out in
yeah,
the field, and I had to have fans blowing on my laptop.
Wow.
And I had one of the big workstation laptops, the like, no joke, don't take it home. And it's like, I already had it on a lift with a fan, and then we had to take other fan and blow it on the laptop because it would like, I had a history. I still have a history. Like laptops don't last more than a year and a half, at least as far as work is concerned. I've had the north bridges get so hot that they slid off. Like, well, because I also take off all like the red line limitations. And I'm like, how much is the laptop? A couple grand? How much is my time over that period of time? More than a couple of grand that they get back. So, in my mind.
My computer got real upset one time because I had.
He got real upset.
I accidentally opened Photoshop and Illustrator at the same time. And it it's just like,
not enough RAMs.
I'm frozen now.
Okay. Yes. Show me your things. Right? Hit the buttons. Hit the buttons.
But I mean, so far it doesn't seem like you have a problem with Android Studio other than just this.
Wait.
Looks like you're doing.
Also, you need to make noise. It's not a high five unless it makes
I mean, of
noise.
course you won't see anything until you.
There you go. You got to sing a little bit. That's how you know.
Yeah, I couldn't even get it.
Okay, guys, are we ready to move on?
Somehow the way this displays is different from any
Okay.
First, we're going to modify the calculate price method signature to have the correct return date in the price method.
Okay, we're
I
gonna
hit resume
this.
and it updates properly on the screen. Guess what time it is? No, it's time for the students to define and call their own method.
Wait, we're asking them to define and call a brand new method?
Yeah.
What's it called?
It's called create order summary. It's going to take a summary of everything they entered into the app and then output that as text.
Do you think they're ready?
I think so. I think it's time for our little birds to spread their wings and fly. Now we're going to change the app so it looks like this. If I change the quantity and then hit the order button, then it prints out a longer summary of the order. This is what will happen in the main activity at a high level. When we click on the order button in the app, we'll call this method, and then inside of this, we're going to call the calculate price method. We're going to call the method with no input parameters. We're going to execute these instructions here, and then we're going to return the price. Once we have the price in the submit order method, we're going to be able to call the create order summary with that price. So we pass in the price to this method, and then we execute the instructions inside of it. And then we're going to return the summary text. And then in these lines of code, we can display that summary onto the screen. To implement that in code, we're going to create the order summary method. This is a screenshot of what the final app should look like. It's the same as what I showed you earlier. The first task is to create this as a new method in the main activity. The method will be called create order summary. It's going to take as input the price of the order, which is going to be a number. Then it's going to return this message. Feel free to use your own name or any other name, and make sure that quantity and total are accurate based on what the user selected in the quantity picker. Then just add thank you. The second step is to then call this new method from the submit order method. Once you get this string back from the submit order method, then go ahead and display it on the screen, like this. Check these boxes when you're done.
All right. Let's add a name method. So let's think about what the components that we need. So we probably need to be able to pass in what? So if we're making the method create order summary, what information are we going to probably need to pass or have it display in that method? What kinds of things are going to need in that method? What are the kind of things that were showing up there?
Quantity, total, and person's order name.
Right, and okay, so what kind of a, well, now the words are escaping me.
String, integer.
Yes, string, integer, and then another string, right? Thank you. Or we can concatenate all of those into what? We can concatenate all of those into a single string, right? And then put new lines after each one. So let's go ahead and do that.
They haven't looked at the optics yet, right?
What?
They haven't learned about optics yet, right?
No.
Okay.
This is why.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. I was just like,
Objects are things that they cover, I think, in the end of like the second series of the.
3D. Is that 3D? Or at the end of the whole nano?
No, it's like in the end of the second class grouping for the nano degree, because I went through and wanted to spec out, okay, so one thing I'm considering is actually in the winter time, once we're kind of a little calmed down from all the fallness, is actually start up with the second of the nano degree series, if you guys would be interested or think other people might be interested, which is not, so you've completed the beginner session or you have a beginner's level of understanding, and then we can move into the second one. So if anybody's interested in that, do let me know. I am considering doing it. Granted, it's not quite as long as this. I think that one's only 4 sessions. But if we could get through most of the nano degree, or all of the nano degree stuff over the course of a year, save y'all some money so you can go in and do it the last little bit, yeah, it would probably be pretty awesome.
Okay.
Some sauce. All right, show me, Captain Kunal. Nobody has. Captain with a K. When's the last time you saw that? Never. Unless it's Captain Crunch. No, it's still a C. Okay. Nobody.
I was like, I was just spelling it.
Can you wait that?
Come on. All right. Captain Kunal needs 3 coffees in order to fulfill his things that he has to do for the day. That will cost him $15, and be sure to thank him on his way out. Let's make it happen. Let's make it happen. Let's do it, guys. You do it. Show me. Show me. I want to push buttons. Oh no, it's good. Touch screen, yeah. Oh, no, I need so many more coffees. Yay! I know how many. Thank you. Come on, guys. I want to see it. All right, who has something I can touch? Yeah, that's not part of this. That's not part of this.
Oh my gosh.
And by the way, it's bracket. It's easier if I just type it. You want to comment X
I
now?
remembered it, but then I just forgot. So.
And then. Okay. But not now. No. You need to go back to this. Go back to this. On the screens. I'm going to cover your screen until I see that it's on the right thing. You need to get your coffee to Captain Kunal, man. You are working at Starbucks. You need to know how many coffees he's going to have, how much you need to get from him. You're the coffee delivery boy.
I'm almost
You got to collect it from Captain Kunal.
create summary string. Now what do I have to call this thing from submit order?
To be honest with you, Stacey, I became a Java developer specifically so that I didn't have to work at Starbucks.
This is such a pressure.
Well, that's why he's in the process. I actually got rejected from Starbucks.
Really?
Yeah, for a like when I first knew I was gonna like graduate, and like the job market was so bad. It was 2009. Nobody took on new hires in 2009, 2010 at all. The market was in its like really bad. Case in point, a lot of my friends, even from a top 10 school, couldn't find jobs for like 2 years. So, like, I knew I was still in the job search, but I needed to have money, right?
It was
Like,
before Android was a thing, wasn't it?
it was very, very early, but yes.
Yeah, because that was like the iPhone. had just come out.
Yeah, so I actually had written iOS stuff, and that didn't matter. Like, it was still hard because think about it. How much of the population in 2009 actually had a smartphone?
Yeah.
Surprisingly, that's a gingerbread is 2009. All days, all days.
Oh, please, dude! I started on Donut.
Yeah. They deprecated.
And you know what? One of my coworkers started before Cupcake.
Preview.
That was preview.
Oh wow.
When they were trying to get it up and running on Qualcomm stuff.
Eclipse was so hard.
No. Oh, Eclipse was so hard. There was something before Eclipse. It was called Text Editor and just using your command window, man. You were just terminal windows, yes, and you had to write your own build files, and it was only in Android Makefile language. I know, that's what I'm saying.
I didn't even know
What?
It's like when you and I were in high school. Actually, most of us were in high school. Facebook was not a thing.
No, it was not a thing.
Was that
No, it was great having your parents not know what you were doing online. That was also great. But also, we didn't have our own computers. You had, no, this is my time, 20-minute warning. 20-minute warning. 20 minutes and you gotta get off, and then I'm gonna be on for a minimum of 30
Some of my
minutes.
friends thought they were so cool because they could customize their MySpace page to HTML.
Dancing kittens, yes.
I just made an edit changing the display list and it's not even popping up. I just called the create order summary in the display message.
Any progress
It doesn't
or any
show up.
questions?
Okay, mine's gonna work.
Sure. You have to figure out logically how does it go
I have
together.
to redeem myself. I've led you wrong with slashes.
All right, I'm gonna move on so that she can show you what's going on.
It's not showing.
What's going
Is there a way
on?
to-
What's
Is there a
going
way to write
What's
mobile apps with JavaScript?
Yes, there are actually. There are ways to write JavaScript. Many, several.
I don't have a hard,
No.
I don't have any problem at all.
Let's do the first step together of adding a new method to the main activity.
But yeah, no, that's actually a very.
You can click anywhere in the flat view
We're gonna
and you
get-
just fix the submit order method.
There's several different,
This is shorthand and it means the same thing as price message equals price message plus all of this. So if I change all of this to be plus equals, it will be the same message method. You can leave it like this if you want, if it's easier to read. All of these tips and tricks lead to the same logic anyways. And before I forget, also remember to add a java.comment comment at the top of this method to describe what it's supposed to be doing. Technically, you don't need a java.comment comment for a private method, but it's just good practice to write a description of a method so that other people who are reading your code will also understand what you're trying to do. The description of this method is that it creates a summary of the order. The input parameter is the price of the order, and it returns the text summary. Alright, we just learned a lot about methods. Now it's time for you to take a break. You can do some jumping jacks, you can go take a walk outside, you can even go to a new browser tab. When you're ready, you can come back here, and then we're going to look into the display message method, one of my favorite methods. In the next coding task, you're going to modify the app so that instead of saying price here, it's going to say order summary. This is a better name because if you change the quantity and then hit order, then the summary does show up here. It's more than just the price. This is a small UI change, but in the process, you're going to be modifying the display message method, which we gave you in lesson 2 without explaining what it really does. In the coming videos, we'll start to understand more about all the different parts that are going on inside this method. You'll begin by experimenting with changing some of these values and seeing what happens. When you make the change, it will cause an error in the display price method, so you can actually delete this method now. You even get a warning now that says that this method is never used. So go ahead and delete it. The overall goal is to change the price section to be called the order summary section. There's a couple of additional changes we'll be making along the way. In the activity main layout file, go ahead and change the price header to say order summary. Then find the text view for the price value, not the header, but the actual value. Change that view to have an ID of this. The view ID used to be something like price text view, but now that we change it into an order summary section, we're going to update the ID as well. Then in the main activity file, in the display message method, go ahead and change the variable name from price text view to order summary text view. And lastly, go ahead and change the reference to r.id.price text view to r.id.order summary text view with the underscores here. When you're done, check these boxes. Then take a moment to step back and make any observations about what's happening in the display message method. Do you have any guesses about what's going on or what the connection is between the XML layout and the Java file?
Okay, let's do it. This is the interactive time. All right, change price to order? Yes, sir. You're already done? Okay. Yes, you can. All right. Change price to order summary, so change that text at the beginning for that label and that text view from price to order summary. And then change the name of the text view for price value to be the order summary text view. It says that, sorry. And then make sure that you repeat how that has actually changed in the Java code as well. So you're first going to change the layout code, then you're going to change the actual Java code. Yes, sir. Show me. Yay, you calculated things. And now you need to do the changes to those two.
I made the order summary.
Oh, okay.
I just need to make the text.
Yes. Yes, you do. It should reflect the same thing as. I know you're using BlueStacks. I know.
Wait, Stacy, this is so confusing, but so.
What's up?
So I changed the display messages to be empty, but it just still says
Try uninstalling the app and reinstalling it.
okay.
This is one of those things that can happen with the lightning. Remember when it doesn't always catch your changes? Remember? You know, like what happened today, probably multiple times.
That's just brutal in a class like this, though.
What?
That's just brutal in a class like this, though. I mean, that's...
Yeah, because you can't, unless you're an Android developer, you would never know that that's the problem. So a lot of times in these classes, they don't have people who are Android developers teaching them. And so you hit all these problems like many of us have in the IDEs or having it run or do all these other things. No clue how to fix the problem. Because, you know, it's fine until there can get eccentricities, but any integrated development environment that does anything has little ticks and issues. And that's why they continue to get better. And this is after we've been programming for so long and code runs like everything. Imagine if you hadn't programmed 10, 15, 20 plus years ago, you have no idea how easy you have it now. Like, oh, it's just got one tick. You can actually write something and it just works the first time. What? Any of
Now
them?
it's just
Palm 3s.
Stacy, now it's just showing a quick error message.
What does it say?
It just says like error while executing and start dash and
I will look at it in just a moment. Yes, sir. You have changed the names? Yes, order summary. Name, Stacy. I don't have an E in my name. Oh, you tried to be slick, man.
Fail.
Oh, misspelled. Misspelling.
Different Stacy.
Different Stacy. How many Stacys you know? Do I need to talk to your wife? Is this a thing?
Starbucks is supposed to spell your name. It's a feature.
Okay. Cool. Those things. Everybody get their thing to do the things that we need to do. Right. It's okay. It's okay. Swear to God, you're gonna live. Your computer's gonna work again. Sorry, I had to do that. You got trash everywhere. Trash just screwed that. Oh, yeah. So it's gonna have a problem because now if you hit go again, it'll work.
Really?
Yeah.
No, I think this is the fourth time I just think
You actually uninstall it?
Yeah, I did.
Check your app, go to settings,
Yeah, I did
apps.
go to apps. It's not there.
You sure?
Yeah, sure.
Because it's saying that there's a remnant still there. That's what it's telling you.
Nope, no, just Java.
It still doesn't mean that it's clear.
I need to go that.
Trust me, I've had a lot of weird stuff happen. I know what this is. There's Java. So sometimes you're gonna have a thing, especially with some of these older phones, you're gonna just power it off. Turn it off and on
This is
again.
from 2015.
You know why? They all have these kind of problems. This is what happens when they deployed something that isn't fully baked. You have a Lightning app problem. You uninstalled it, it thought that it was still partially installed, so when it tries to launch it, it says that there's no launcher. Because the app doesn't, part of the app doesn't exist in your.
Just being unrecognized.
Yeah, but of course it's gonna be unrecognized, it's not turned on yet, it's not fully on. All you see is a splash screen, oh,
Always it says
patience.
USB not.
Why do you think coffee, tea, when you first go in the morning, you gotta start up your computer, and as everything's decrypting and booting, go and get your coffee, use the restroom, show back up. Usually that's about when it's done. Getting back to where it was. Patience. Just find other ways to activate. That's it.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Hardware issues or something I can't really help with.
Do
Virtual
you
box
have a
version or
PowerPoint?
something.
We have PowerPoint.
Oh,
Yes, it works, Stacy.
for Android Studio? You want a Linux version, right? I think they have a Linux version
Okay.
because most people at Google work in Linux.
Well,
Let me see if I can find it.
Linux, but
Yes,
you don't gotta worry about where all the libraries are and
I gotta blow
all
myself
that. Then you can run a script that finds that for you, but then, you know, is it
Oh, well,
how it's
then-
packaged?
Hey,
but
what's the
then-
most
I mean,
important thing that you
I'm not
learned from the
necessarily saying you
show?
should have to use Linux. I thought when you said you wanted a
Have you
virtual
tried
box,
turning
I
it
was
off and on
thinking
again?
you had a Linux environment that you were used to, or
Basic IT.
Well,
Always. What's the first step? You try turning it off and on.
the,
No
big,
matter what the
big
problem is,
data workshop,
turn it on again. If it's still broken, then you have an action problem.
they, you know, one of the things that you download was a virtual box image of
In regards to
I mean,
Toaster
something,
doesn't work. Got stuck in some weird state. You try turning it off and on
OS with
again.
everything already,
Microwave.
tools
Oh,
already
I mean,
loaded
I
in and
mean,
run, so
I
you
mean,
just, you had to make sure the virtual
You tried
box
unplugging it from
was
playing
running
it.
on your machine, but then it was just like,
I mean, the Android Studio, once you get a computer that's powerful enough, it should, the install should just happen. Like, it should run.
Sometimes that works though. Okay,
it should, well,
so we have the names changed to protect all the
how much money
innocents.
do I need to spend?
Which means it's time to move on.
At a computer.
Which means I click all the
I mean,
boxes.
most computers.
Click, click.
I don't know, honestly.
Click,
I don't know what the minimum specs
Click.
are, but let me see if I can find them.
bang.
Looking for this.
Let's start with the first step, which is to change the price header to say order something.
Very end.
In the last quiz, I asked you to modify a bunch of things in your app. You may not have understood what you were doing, but that's okay. We're going to talk about it now. Specifically, we're going to talk about resources in your app. Resources live under the res directory of your app. Res is short for resources. On the other hand, Java files live in the Java folder, and we have mainactivity.java located inside this folder. An Android app is primarily made up of resources and Java code. The Java code consists of files like mainactivity.java. Altogether, it handles what should happen when the app is running, like responding to button clicks or other events. Then you have resources that live in the res directory of your app. This includes images, text strings, colors, dimensions, like for width and height, XML files, like for menus and layouts, as well as raw media files, like for audio or video. One of the major advantages to separating out the Java code and the resources is that we can provide alternative resources to make the app look better on certain devices. So if we want a different layout on larger screen devices, we can provide that by just swapping it out. Or if we want to translate these strings into another language, then it makes it easier to swap out the strings in just a centralized location instead of having it scattered all over the code files.
No.
Escape it, thanks. Whoa, what happened? Go next.
Now we know that we can refer to XML resources in the Java code. But what exactly is the relationship between the resources and the Java code? How do they come together as part of a full app experience? Let's start at the point when you click on the Just Java app icon. It opens up the main activity. Now you don't see anything yet because it's still being initialized. Thankfully, a lot of the complexity involved in initializing the activity is handled automatically for you by Android. The important part that we care about is that in the main activity file, the onCreate method gets called automatically. This is when the activity is getting created. It does a bunch of work, and then we have an important line that says set content view, and then the resource ID for the layout file. It's r.layout.activity_main. This means that the content view of the activity should be set to the layout as specified in the activity main XML file. This is the method call, and the input parameter is this resource ID. Once you set the layout that you're going to use for the content view, then the Android device can go ahead and start parsing this XML layout file. Parsing is like reading this file and trying to interpret that, like, oh, this is a linear layout, oh, this is a text view, these are the attributes, and so on. So it's trying to understand what this file contains. The Android device starts by reading at the top of the file. It recognizes that there's a linear layout here. Then it inflates a Java object to represent that linear layout. Then it goes to the next line and sees that we need to add a text view as a child to that linear layout, like that. This is starting to look like the view hierarchy from lesson 2. What I didn't tell you earlier is that this is actually a hierarchy of Java objects. We're going to be learning more about Java objects in the coming videos, so it's okay if you don't fully understand it yet. When we get to the next line, we see that we need to inflate a linear layout Java object. That gets added as a child to this root linear layout. Then we see a button element, so we add that as a child to the linear layout. So we continue down the file until we've inflated all the views that we need for our view hierarchy. Once we have this view hierarchy of Java objects, then we can manipulate them and change them while the app is running. An object like the text view here contains state information, like the text color, the text size. The object also has methods, so we can call those methods and change the internal state. So for example, we can change the text while the app is running. Interacting with all of these objects is called object-oriented programming. We will cover this in more detail in the coming videos. So to summarize, in the main activity when we call set content view to this layout, then we read this layout and then inflate a bunch of Java objects. These Java objects make up the view hierarchy of the app. The main activity holds on to this view hierarchy, and then as you interact with the main activity, it can update these objects.
Okay.
Do you remember the boxes?
What boxes?
These boxes.
Huh.
Do you remember them?
Oh yeah, I do remember them. They're variables where you can put the value inside.
Yeah, and you can combine multiple of these variables to create a larger Java object.
Oh, okay, so you can take 2 or more variables and make it into something bigger.
Exactly.
Okay. Like a text view.
Yeah, so we can have an integer variable.
This is for the font size.
Exactly.
Okay.
And then we can also have a string variable.
And the string variable for the actual text itself.
Yeah. And those can go inside the text view as the state of the text view.
And then we can interact with those things using different methods that we're going to play with next.
Exactly.
Okay, let's do that.
As we mentioned earlier, showing a text view on the screen like this is actually controlled by a Java object within the app. This is an example of a text view Java object. It's like a box, and inside of it, it holds state. The state is made up of a bunch of fields. A field is a variable, like in lesson 2 when we learned about global variables. We can have a text field to store the today string, which is going to be the text that's ultimately displayed on the screen. We can also have an integer field to store the font size of this text. There's also a bunch of other fields like text color, font family that make up the state of the text view. I just didn't draw them in this picture. To interact with this Java object and change it while the app is running, we can call methods on the text view. We learned about methods earlier in lesson 3. Some example methods on a text view are setText and getText. You can also have methods like setTextSize or getTextSize and so on. Each of these methods just executes a list of instructions. You can have more complex methods like onDraw, which handles drawing the text view onto the screen. So overall, this text view object holds state information on what this text view contains, and you can call methods to interact with this text view, such as to modify the state or to do more complex actions. To show an image view on the screen, we actually have a Java object for image view inside of the app. This particular image view contains state information like which image should be shown, as well as the scale type, like center crop. Again, there's a bunch of other fields that make up the state of an image view. I just didn't draw them here. There's methods like setImage, setScaleType, and even more complex methods like onDraw to handle drawing this image view onto the screen. Note that as developers, we don't explicitly have to call onDraw to tell it to draw onto the screen. Android handles calling this automatically for us. But it is useful to be able to call these methods to change the image view, for example. So how do we know what all the fields are inside the state of an image view and what all the methods are of this image view? To answer that question, we have to look at the class definition for that object. It's a file called textview.java, similar to how we define mainActivity.java. Inside this class textview file, we have a bunch of code that talks about the state of the text view as well as the methods. Now, it doesn't say state and methods exactly, but it just contains information on the state and contains information on the methods. You can think of this as defining the rules of how a text view behaves. This object instance can hold specific information like the text string today or the text size 18. You can also use this class to create even more text view object instances. And these could have a different text string value. This one could hold text that says hello, and this one could hold text that says goodbye. They could have different font sizes, different text colors, etc. However, they're all based off of the class template. You may find it hard to distinguish between a class and an object instance, but that's okay. It takes some time to get used to. Here's an analogy to help you. You can think of it as creating a floor plan for our house. You can use this floor plan to create the actual homes. Each of these homes can be slightly different, but they're all based off of this base floor plan. It's important to note that the floor plan is not a house itself. It's just the plan. Similarly, the text view class is used to create these object instances. So these instances are the ones with the actual text values, text color values, and text sizes. So what does one of these classes look like? We've created a simplified version of the TextView class, which would be saved in the textview.java file. We simplified it so it'd be easier for you to understand what a class would look like. First, it starts with an access modifier. It's marked as public so that other things like an activity can use this TextView class. Then we have the word class. This indicates to Java that this is a class definition. Then we have the name of the class. The name of a class in Java starts with a capital letter and is in camel case, so there's no spaces and a capitalized subsequent words. There's some other text here, but we'll look into that later. The important thing is we have an opening brace, and then at the bottom of the definition we have a closing brace. Now inside this TextView class, we have a bunch of variables here. Each of these represents a field in the text view. So we have a field for the text of the text view and a field for the text color of the text view. There are other fields as well, but remember this is the simplified version of the TextView class. We also have a variable to store a reference to the context of the application. You can read more about context in the instructor notes below, but it's basically a way to access information about the app. Like for example, you can access resources in the app using the context. And these are the methods of the text view. The setText method takes as input a text string. Then it updates the global variable mText to use this new value. Similarly, the setText color takes as input a new color, and it updates the internal state to have this new color value. There's also methods like getText and getTextColor, which return the internal text string or the internal text color. One more thing, you may have noticed that these global variables here all start with a lowercase m. M stands for member variable, and these are all member variables of this text view class. Member variable is just another way to say field or the state of the text view class. Here's a simplified image view class. You would find it in the imageview.java file. It starts with public class, and then image view is the name of the class, and then we have opening and closing braces. This makes up the state of the image view. Normally it would have more fields than this, but I just want to show you an example. This is an integer variable, and it's called mImageID, M for member variable. This stores the resource ID for the image that should be shown in this image view. Down here we have the constructor, which is used to construct a new image view object, and it takes as input a context, and then it initializes these variables. Then we have a method, it's called setImage, and it takes as input a resource ID for the new image that should be shown in this image view. Inside this method, we update the internal variable for image ID. Again, we created these simplified text view and image view classes to help you understand the concept of classes. Now let's look at the real version of these classes inside the Android framework. To see the code for the Java classes in Android, you can install this Chrome extension. If you're not using the Chrome browser, you can see the instructor notes below for how to access these files. Once that Chrome extension is installed, then when I search for something like TextView Android, and I go look at the reference documentation for this class, then there's going to be this extra link here that says View Source. This is really for advanced developers if you're curious about the code that is used to create this text view. This is a TextView Java file that was defined by someone on the Android team. As you can see, it's really long and complex, but it still has the main parts of a class. It starts with public, class, and then text view, and then the class. And then this is the opening braces all the way at the bottom here. At the top of the class, you see a bunch of fields here, and this makes up the state of the class. For example, we see that text color is a field. You also see that text is a field. And here's a constructor for text view that takes as input a context. If I hit Command F, or Control F if you have Windows, then I can try to search for setText. And here's the setText method. This method is going to set the string value of the text view. And if I search for getText, then I also see this method returns the text that the text view is displaying. You get the idea, and you can browse through this on your own if you want. If I search for the image view documentation page, then I can click on View Source to view all the code for the image view class. The file says public class image view, and then these are the fields that make up the state of the image view, and then there's a bunch of methods at the bottom of the file. The code in this file is pretty complex as well, and it's also thousands of lines of code. The best part about object-oriented programming, though, is that you don't need to know about all these details. As a developer, you can use TextView and ImageView in your app without knowing about all the gory details of what's going on inside of it. In the last video, I briefly mentioned that a constructor is defined within the class, and it is used to actually create the object instances. So we call the TextView constructor to create this instance, we call it again to create another instance, and so on. Let's look at the code for how to actually call a constructor. Remember how we created a new integer variable in quantity, and we set it to have an initial value of 2? Creating a new object and storing it inside a variable is going to follow a similar format. It looks something like this. Instead of the int data type, though, we have an object data type. The object data type is whatever we call the class name. In this case, it's TextView. It can be anything as long as it follows the conventions for variable names. So we just call it TextView. then set equal to the object. But we can break down the right-hand side further. The right-hand side follows the format of new, followed by the object data type, which is text view in this case. This is calling the constructor defined in the text view class. So we have parentheses, the input arguments to the constructor. So if the constructor requires a context object, then we pass the context here. Remember that the context object helps you access application resources and other things about the application environment. So altogether, this is creating a new text view object by calling the constructor, and then it's storing this new object inside a variable called price.
Price? Price what? Why did you stop? Come on, price what? Come on, lady.
Then we have the context here.
No! What happened? Do you not work anymore? Are you broke? Okay, we're gonna make sure that we are creating an object. Right.
Here.
Come on, baby. We were at 151. Did YouTube break? Is YouTube dead now? I don't think so, because Google still works. Yep. Internet's still good. I don't know what to tell you guys. Do you want to see if it's like another video that works? Let's see. Wait, where did my mouse go? There it is. Alright, let's see if you just go do clips on and on there.
So let's go back to the display message method that we.
Alright, let's see if it's actually just. Let's see. Also, still seems to be broken.
Why is it broken on just one video?
It's something's going on with this particular video that makes it not work.
Yeah, I'm getting the same thing on that video. I'm trying to play it on my machine.
All right, I'm sorry guys, we're gonna skip.
Let's go back to the display message method that we were looking at earlier. We were trying to figure out what exactly is going on in here. From what we've learned so far, it looks like there's a text view object, and the variable name is called word summary text view. Then it says a bunch of code that we don't really recognize. But on the next line, we use that variable order summary text view, and we try to set the text on it to be this message. Let's find out more about how to call methods like this on objects. When we call a method on an object, it has to follow this format. First, we write the object variable name. In this case, it's titled text view. Then we add a dot. Then it's followed by the method name in this variable, which is set text in this data type is button. This method is defined exactly this way in the text view class. The method declaration also specifies that there's any object data types. Say, for example, I created a class definition for cat view. Then I could use this line to create a new cat view. In this case, the constructor, since we're calling the constructor and have to pass in any inputs, we have parentheses, and then we put the inputs in there. Here's a third example that creates a button object and stores it in this variable. The data type is button, the variable name is or button, and then we say new button to call the constructor. You can even define your own object data types. Say, for example, I created a class definition for cat view. Then I use this line to create a new cat view. In this case, the constructor requires an input string for the name of the cat. So that's why I put tiger in parentheses and pass that into the cat view constructor. To determine what to pass as input to these constructors, you have to look at either the class java.file or the class source file. All these cases use the word new to create a new object. If we go back to the Java keyword list, then indeed we define that the word new is in the list. Sometimes when you're looking at documentation, it may advise you to use a factory method to create an object. That is, instead of a constructor. Here's an example. To create a new media player, the documentation advises you to use the method mediaPlayer.create. And this returns a media player object that can be stored inside this variable. It follows the format of object data type, so media player with capital M, dot, and then the factory method name, which is create in this case, and then you pass in the input arguments to initialize that media player. Here's another example of how to create a toast. Toast is a message that pops up temporarily in your app and then disappears. So the code starts with toast with a capital T, because this is object data type. And then we have a dot and then make text, which is a factory method name. And we pass the input arguments to create this toast. To know what the factory method name is and what the input arguments are, you have to check the documentation for the toast class. In general, in order to know whether you should create an object using a constructor or with a factory method, you can just Google search for how to create that object. Using a constructor is the most common way to create a new object. It's less common you would need to use a factory method, but know for sure which one you should use, you can just Google search for how to create that object. Here's a chance to practice with creating objects. In each of these lines of code, there's an error. Figure out what the error is and then write the correct line of code in these boxes below.
Okay. So what we're going to do is skip that because we're already at 9 o'clock. And I do want to get you guys through the content so that we can go through some basic questions. We really only have a couple more things. So let's start back where we were.
Put parameter of a string. So we put parentheses and then pass in the string as input. Then we end the statement with a semicolon. When you write this line of code, it modifies the title text view object so that it displays this on the screen. The reason we use the object variable name here is because there could be multiple text views in your app. So make sure you're calling the method on the right object instance. When you're specifying input arguments, make sure you're specifying the right arguments in the right order according to the method declaration. So if there's no inputs, you would just have an empty set of parentheses. The way we pass inputs to a method is the same as we learned earlier in lesson 3. And remember to separate the object variable name and the method name with the dot. Here's another example. On that same title text view object, we're going to call the setTextSize method on it. This method takes an integer as input for the new text size. So in this case, we just pass 18 as the new text size. When Android device executes this line of code, it's going to change this title text view to have a large font size of 18. In this example, we're calling a method on the text view object that is called warning text view. The method is called setTextColor, and it takes as input a new color. Notice that the color is specified as color.red. So if we look at the documentation for the color class, then you can scroll down and see that red is defined here. There are a bunch of other colors that you can use here as well. So when you call setTextColor, you could call color.blue or color.black. And lastly, here's an example of calling a method on an image view. This image view object has a variable name of welcome image view, and we call the method setImageResource on it. This method takes as input the new image that we should set on this image view. We specify the new image as a resource ID in the format of r.drawable. And this is the file name. This is just another use case of using resource IDs in Java code. To get the full list of methods that you can call a text view object, just open up the text view Android documentation page. You can get to it by just searching for text view Android and clicking here. So this is a page we already recognize, and we already know about the XML attributes that are listed on this page. If I scroll down further, then I can see a list of all the public methods in the text view class. If you want to find something, you just use Command F or Control F if you're on Windows. I'm going to look for the setTextColor method, which we used earlier. Here's the setTextColor method, and it takes an integer color as an input param. All these methods were declared as public methods in the text view class. That's why we can call these methods now. If they were declared as private methods, we wouldn't see